Listen carefully. Right now, in this exact moment, you are not living one life. You are living two versions of you, two different paths, two realities happening at the same time. And the strange part is, you can feel it. That moment when something almost happened, that feeling like you've already been here before. That quiet voice inside you saying, "This isn't the only version of me." What if that feeling is not in your head? What if you are actually between realities? Because quantum physics doesn't describe a fixed world. It describes a field of possibilities, where multiple outcomes exist until one is chosen. Which means there may be another version of you right now, living a completely different life. And sometimes those realities begin to overlap. And when they do, you feel it as confusion, as anxiety, as a shift you cannot explain. Tonight, you're about to understand something most people never will. Because once you see this, you won't be able to unsee it. One reality is not fixed. It's possibility. You've been told your entire life that reality is solid, that what you see is what exists, that what is happening right now is the only version of truth. But that belief is something your mind created to feel stable, because the deeper truth is far more unsettling. Reality is not fixed, it is not stable, and it is not singular. At the deepest level of existence, nothing is locked in place. Everything is open. Everything is fluid. Everything is still becoming. There is a principle in physics known as quantum superposition, and it completely changes how we understand reality. Before something is observed, it does not exist as one definite state. It exists as many possibilities at the same time. Not one outcome, not one path, but a range of potential states, all existing together, overlapping, waiting. Think about that carefully. Right now, in front of you, around you, within you, there is not just one version of reality. There are multiple possibilities, but your mind locks onto one and calls it real. Not because it is the only one that exists, but because it is the one you are experiencing. Now think about your life. Every moment where you had a choice. Say something or stay silent. Take the risk or play it safe. Move forward or hold back. You believe you chose one option and the others disappeared. But what if they didn't? What if those other possibilities still exist, just not experienced by you? This is where it becomes personal, because it means your life is not a single straight path. It is one path selected from many. And the version you are living right now is just one outcome that became real through your attention, your choices, and your awareness. That strange feeling you sometimes get, that your life could have gone differently, that there were other versions of you, that feeling is not meaningless. It is your mind sensing possibility. Because reality is not just what is happening. It is everything that could happen, narrowed down into one experience. And your awareness plays a role in that narrowing. You are not just observing reality. You are participating in it. Every second, your focus, your beliefs, and your attention shape how reality appears to you. This does not mean you control everything, but it does mean you are not separate from what you experience. You are connected to it. And once you understand that reality is not fixed, something shifts inside you. You stop seeing your life as permanent. You stop believing that things have to be this way. And you begin to see something most people never notice. That what feels solid is actually flexible. What feels final is only temporary. And what feels like the only path is just the one you are currently walking. Which means something powerful. If reality is not fixed, then your life is not fixed either. You are not trapped. You are not locked into one version of yourself. You are inside a field of possibilities. And every moment, you are moving through it, quietly choosing which version becomes your reality. 2. Observation creates reality. You think you are just watching life happen. You think you are standing on the outside, observing what is already there. But what if that's not true? What if your observation is not passive? What if it is the very thing shaping what becomes real? There is a famous experiment in physics known as the Double-Slit Experiment, and what it revealed shook the foundation of reality itself. When tiny particles are not being observed, they behave like waves, spread out, undefined, everywhere at once. But the moment they are observed, they collapse into a single position, a single outcome, as if the act of looking forces reality to decide. Think about that carefully. Before observation, multiple possibilities exist. After observation, only one remains. Now, step away from the lab and look at your own life. What are you constantly observing? What are you focusing on again and again? Because your attention is not neutral, it is selective. And whatever you repeatedly focus on begins to define your experience. If your mind is always scanning for problems, you will see more problems. If your attention is locked onto fear, your reality will start to feel dangerous. If you keep replaying doubt, your world will begin to reflect uncertainty, not because the world changed, but because your observation filtered it. You are not seeing everything. You are seeing what your mind is trained to notice. And over time, that becomes your reality. This is why two people can live in the same environment, yet experience completely different lives. One sees opportunity, the other sees limitation. One feels expansion, the other feels stuck. Same world, different observation, different reality. Because observation is not just receiving information, it is selecting it. And what you select grows stronger in your awareness. This is where it becomes uncomfortable, because it means you are not just a victim of what you experience. You are participating in shaping it. Every time you focus your attention, you are reinforcing a version of reality. Every time you dwell on something, you are giving it more weight. Every time you repeat a thought, you are strengthening a pattern. And slowly, without even realizing it, you collapse possibility into a familiar experience, again and again, until it feels like this is just how life is. But it isn't. It is how you have been observing it. And the moment you change what you observe, something begins to shift. At first, it's subtle, almost unnoticeable. But over time, your reality starts to reorganize. Because your attention has moved, you begin to see things you never noticed before. You begin to feel different responses inside you. Situations that once felt heavy start to feel lighter, not because the world suddenly became different, but because you are no longer collapsing the same version of it. You are allowing a different possibility to take form. This is the hidden power most people never understand. They try to change their life from the outside, while keeping the same patterns of observation inside, and nothing changes. Because reality follows attention, not effort alone. So if you want to step into a different version of your life, you don't start by forcing outcomes. You start by shifting what you consistently observe. Because in a world where observation shapes reality, your attention is not small. It is everything. And once you see this clearly, you begin to understand something deeper. You are not just watching your life unfold. You are quietly deciding which version of it becomes real. 3. You exist in multiple timelines. You've always believed your life is moving in one direction, one path, one timeline, one version of events unfolding step by step. But that belief only feels true because your mind cannot perceive anything beyond it. At a deeper level, reality may not be a single line at all. It may be a vast network of timelines, all existing at once. Every possibility, every outcome, every version of your life, not imagined, not hypothetical, but real in ways you don't normally experience. In physics, there is an idea known as the many worlds interpretation, and it suggests something that sounds almost impossible to accept, that every time a choice is made, reality does not eliminate the other options. It branches. One version of you continues forward on this path, and another version continues on a different one. Both exist, but you only experience one. Now, pause for a moment. Think about your life. Think about the moments that changed everything. The decision you almost made but didn't. The opportunity you hesitated on. The conversation you avoided. The risk you walked away from. You remember those moments as missed chances. But what if they weren't missed? What if they became real? Just not in this version of your life. What if somewhere, in a different timeline, you made that decision? You said those words. You took that risk. And your life unfolded in a completely different direction. Because according to this idea, every possible version of your life exists. Right now. Not in the future. Not as imagination. But as parallel realities that diverge the moment choices were made. And this is where it begins to feel personal. Because sometimes you feel it. Not clearly. Not logically. But subtly. A strange sense that things could have been different. And somehow, that different still feels close. A quiet tension between who you are and who you could have been. That feeling is not just regret. It's something deeper. It's your awareness brushing against the edges of other possibilities. Because your mind is not completely disconnected from them. It is rooted in the same field where all timelines exist. And occasionally, you sense the difference. This is why certain moments feel heavier than they should. Why some decisions feel like they carry more weight than logic can explain. Because at those points, multiple timelines are close together. Multiple versions of reality are possible, and you are standing at the edge of divergence. Most people don't notice it. They move quickly. They react automatically. They follow pre-witched patterns without awareness. And so, they remain on familiar paths, repeating similar outcomes, living similar versions of themselves, over and over again. But when you slow down, when you become aware, you start to notice something unusual, that your life is not just unfolding, it is branching. Every choice is not just an action, it is a direction, and each direction leads to a different version of you, a different life, a different reality. The version of you who stays silent becomes someone different from the version who speaks. The version of you who avoids risk lives a completely different life from the one who steps forward. And these differences don't just affect outcomes. They shape identity. They shape who you become. This is why your life sometimes feels like it is pulling you in different directions. Because, in a deeper sense, it is. There are multiple potential versions of you, and each one is a path waiting to be taken. But here is where most people misunderstand. They think this idea means they are powerless, that everything already exists, so nothing matters. But the opposite is true, because even if all possibilities exist, you are still the one experiencing one of them. You are still the one moving through one path, which means your awareness, your attention, your choices determine which timeline becomes real for you. Not in theory, but in lived experience. You are not switching between random realities. You are aligning with specific ones through what you believe, through what you focus on, through what you repeatedly choose. And slowly, without realizing it, you move deeper into a version of life that matches those patterns. This is why people feel stuck, not because they are trapped in one reality, but because they are consistently choosing the same path, the same reactions, the same fears, the same limitations. And so, They remain within the same timeline, even though others exist. But once you become aware of this, something changes. You begin to see your decisions differently. You begin to feel the weight of small choices, not as pressure, but as possibility, because you realize even a small shift can move you toward a completely different version of your life. And that version already exists as a possibility, waiting, not for luck, not for time, but for alignment, for a different choice, for a moment where you decide to step into something unfamiliar. And that is where transformation begins, not by forcing reality to change, but by choosing differently within it, because every moment you hesitate, every moment you act, every moment you decide, you are not just living your life, you are selecting a timeline. And once you truly understand that, you stop asking, "What will happen to me?" and you start asking something far more powerful. Which version of my life am I moving toward right now? 4. Why you feel split. There are moments in your life that don't make sense. Moments where everything looks normal on the outside, but inside, something feels off. Not broken, not chaotic, just divided. Like one part of you is moving forward, while another part is quietly pulling back. Like you're present, but not fully here. Like you're living your life, but also watching it at the same time, and no one else seems to notice. So you ignore it. You call it overthinking. You call it stress. You tell yourself it's nothing, but that feeling doesn't go away. It shows up again, in silence, in decisions, in those quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. And the truth is, that feeling is trying to tell you something, because what you're experiencing is not just confusion, it's the tension between possibilities. Your mind was trained to believe in one identity, one self, one clear version of who you are. But reality is not that simple. At a deeper level, there are multiple versions of you, multiple directions your life can take, multiple ways your identity can unfold. And when those possibilities come close together, you feel it as division. This is what it means to feel split. Not because you are broken, but because you are aware of more than one path. Think about a moment when you had to make a difficult decision. Not a small one, but one that could change everything. Part of you knew what to do. Clear, direct, certain. But another part of you resisted, questioned, doubted, and suddenly, you weren't one person anymore. You were two. One pushing forward, one holding back. That moment wasn't weakness. It was awareness of divergence. Two possible realities, pulling at your attention at the same time, and your mind trying to hold both. This is why some decisions feel heavy, not because they are difficult, but because they are gateways, points where your life can branch into completely different directions. And for a brief moment, you stand in between. You feel both versions. You sense both outcomes, and it creates tension. Most people escape that feeling quickly. They distract themselves. They delay. They choose the familiar path because it feels safer, because it reduces the discomfort. But something important is lost in that moment, because that discomfort was awareness. Awareness that you are not limited to one version of yourself, that you are standing at the edge of change. And instead of stepping forward, you stepped back into what you already know. This is how people stay the same for years, not because they lack opportunity, but because they avoid the feeling of being split. They avoid the moment where identity is uncertain, because that moment feels unstable. But here is the truth most people never understand. That unstable feeling is where transformation begins. Because when you no longer feel fully aligned with your current self, it means something inside you is shifting. It means the version you've been living is no longer the only one you can sense. Another version is becoming visible. Another possibility is getting closer. and your mind doesn't know how to process it yet. So it creates tension, it creates doubt, it creates that feeling of being divided. But that division is not something to fear. It is something to understand, because it is showing you that you are not fixed, that your identity is not permanent, that who you are right now is just one version among many. And when you begin to see that clearly, something changes. You stop fighting the feeling. You stop trying to force yourself into one identity. You stop pretending that everything is certain, and instead, you begin to observe the split. You begin to notice the different voices inside you, the part that wants to stay the same, and the part that wants something more, the part that fears change, and the part that is ready for it. And slowly, you realize something powerful. You don't have to eliminate one side. You don't have to silence the doubt completely. You don't have to become perfect before you move forward. You just have to choose which voice you follow, because both exist. Both are real experiences within you, but only one becomes your direction. Only one becomes your path. And the more you become aware of this, the more control you gain. Not control over reality itself, but control over which version of yourself you align with. This is where most people get stuck. They wait to feel completely certain before they act. They think clarity must come first. Confidence must come first. Alignment must come first. But it doesn't, because clarity doesn't remove the split. Choice does. The moment you choose, something inside you begins to stabilize. The tension reduces. The noise quiets. Not because the other possibilities disappear, but because you are no longer standing between them. You are moving. You are aligning. You are stepping into one version of yourself. And the more consistently you do that, the less divided you feel, because identity is not something you find. It is something you reinforce through repeated choice. This is why people who act with intention start to feel more grounded, more clear, more certain, not because they figured everything out, but because they stopped staying in between. They stopped living in hesitation. They stopped feeding multiple directions at once, and they committed, not to perfection, but to movement. So the next time you feel that division inside you, don't run from it. Don't label it as weakness. Don't try to silence it immediately. Pause. Observe it. Because that feeling is showing you something important. It is showing you that you are not limited to one version of yourself. It is showing you that change is available. It is showing you that you are standing at a point of decision. And in that moment, you are not lost. You are not broken. You are not confused. You are simply aware that more than one reality is possible. And now, you have to choose which one you are going to step into. 5. Your thoughts are tuning your reality. You believe your thoughts are just reactions. Small, invisible, temporary. Something that comes and goes inside your mind without really changing anything outside. But that belief is one of the biggest illusions you've been living under, because your thoughts are not passive. They are directional. They are selective. And more than anything, they are tuning you into a specific version of reality. Right now, at this very moment, you are not experiencing everything that exists. You are experiencing what your mind is focused on, out of millions of details around you. Sounds, sensations, possibilities, opportunities. Your awareness filters almost all of it out, and it only lets in what matches your internal state. This means something most people never realize. You don't see reality as it is. You see reality as you are. Your thoughts decide what stands out. Your beliefs decide what feels real. Your focus decides what grows. And slowly, without you noticing, your inner world begins to shape your outer experience. Not by magically changing the world, but by changing what you notice, what you react to, and what you reinforce. This is how two people can walk through the same situation and live completely different experiences. One sees rejection, another sees redirection. One sees failure, Another sees feedback. Same moment, different interpretation, different reality, because their thoughts are tuning them into different meanings. And meaning is everything. Once your mind assigns meaning to something, your emotions follow, your behavior follows, and eventually, your results follow. So if your thoughts are constantly repeating, "This won't work," "I'm not ready," "This always goes wrong," then your mind begins filtering reality to prove that true. You notice more obstacles. You hesitate more often. You miss opportunities you would have taken before. And it feels like life is confirming your belief. But it isn't. You are confirming it by tuning into it again and again. This is how invisible patterns become visible outcomes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, through repetition. Every thought you repeat becomes a signal, and that signal strengthens a direction. The more you think something, the more natural it feels, the more real it becomes, until one day, it no longer feels like a thought. It feels like truth. And once something feels like truth, you stop questioning it. You stop exploring alternatives. You stop seeing other possibilities. And you lock yourself into a version of reality without even realizing it. This is why people feel stuck. Not because there are no other paths, but because their thoughts keep tuning them into the same one. Again, and again, and again. But here's where it becomes powerful. If your thoughts can trap you in one version of reality, they can also move you into another, because your mind is not fixed. Your patterns are not permanent. They were built through repetition, which means they can be changed through repetition. At first, it feels unnatural. When you try to think differently, your mind resists. It pulls you back into old patterns, old reactions, old beliefs, because that is what it's familiar with. But familiarity is not truth. It's just repetition. And the moment you understand that, you stop trusting every thought you have. You begin to question it. You begin to observe it. You begin to choose which ones you follow and which ones you let go. This is where your power begins. Not in controlling everything you think, but in deciding what you keep reinforcing. Because you don't need to eliminate negative thoughts completely. You just need to stop feeding them. You stop repeating them. You stop identifying with them. And slowly, they lose strength. At the same time, you begin introducing new patterns, new ways of seeing, new interpretations. You start asking different questions. What if this works? What if this is an opportunity? What if I'm capable of more than I've been allowing? And at first, nothing changes on the outside, but something starts shifting inside. Your attention moves. Your perception expands. You begin noticing things you ignored before. Small opportunities, different responses, new possibilities. And that's how the shift begins. Not with a sudden transformation, but with a change in what you are tuned into. Because reality does not suddenly become different. You become aware of a different part of it. And the more you align with that, the more it becomes your experience. This is why consistency matters. Because one positive thought won't change your reality, but repeated patterns will. Just like repeated doubt shaped your past, repeated clarity can shape your future. This is not about forcing yourself to be positive. It's about becoming intentional, about noticing where your attention goes, and deciding if that direction is leading you where you want to go. Because every thought is a step, every belief is a path, every focus is a direction, and over time, those directions become destinations. So if you continue thinking the same way, you will continue experiencing the same reality. But if you begin shifting your thoughts, even slightly, you begin moving, not instantly, but steadily, toward a different version of your life. And that version already exists as a possibility. You're not creating it from nothing. You're aligning with it, tuning into it, allowing it to become visible to you. This is the part most people miss. They wait for reality to change first, before they change how they think. But it doesn't work that way. Your thinking changes first, and then reality begins to reflect it. Slowly, subtly, but consistently. And once you truly understand this, you stop treating your thoughts as random noise. You start seeing them as signals. Signals that are constantly guiding you toward one version of reality or another. And in that moment, you realize something powerful. You are not just thinking, you are tuning. And the question is no longer, what is happening to me? The real question becomes, what am I aligning myself with right now? 6. The moment you choose, reality collapses. There is a moment in every life, so small, so quiet, that most people miss it. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't announce itself, but it changes everything. It's the moment you choose. Not think, not imagine, not hesitate, but choose. Because up until that point, your life exists as possibility. Different paths, different outcomes, different versions of who you could become, all of them open, all of them available. And for a while, you stay in between. You think about what could happen. You replay different scenarios in your mind. You imagine success and failure, and everything in between. You feel pulled in multiple directions. Part of you wants to move forward. Part of you wants to stay where it's safe. And as long as you stay in that space, nothing becomes real. Everything remains potential. This is where most people live. Not in reality, but in hesitation. They believe they are waiting for clarity, waiting for the right moment, waiting to feel ready. But what they're actually doing is avoiding the moment of collapse. Because the moment you choose, something irreversible happens. All other possibilities begin to fade, not because they stop existing, but because you are no longer aligned with them. Your path narrows, your direction becomes clear, and suddenly, you are no longer thinking about your life. You are living it. This is why choosing feels heavy, because deep down, you know it's not just an action. It's a commitment to one version of reality. When you speak instead of staying silent, you become a different version of yourself. When you take the risk instead of avoiding it, you step into a different timeline. When you walk away instead of holding on, you close one path and open another. And once that happens, there is no going back to the exact same moment. That version of possibility is gone for you. This is what makes choice powerful, and this is also what makes people afraid of it. Because as long as you don't choose, you can pretend everything is still possible. You can hold on to multiple versions of your life at once. You can imagine different futures without committing to any of them, and that feels safe. But it's also where life becomes stagnant. Because potential without action never becomes reality. It just remains an idea. And over time, that space between possibilities becomes uncomfortable. You feel stuck. You feel restless. You feel like something is missing. Not because life is empty, but because you are not collapsing it into something real. You are hovering above your own life, instead of stepping into it. This is why people say things like, I don't know what I want. I'm not ready yet. I'll decide later. But later never comes. Because clarity doesn't arrive before the decision. It arrives after. The moment you choose, your mind begins to align with that direction. Your actions follow. Your perception adjusts. And what once felt uncertain starts to make sense. Not because the path was clear from the beginning, but because you committed to walking it. This is the hidden truth. You don't choose because you're sure. You become sure because you choose. And once you understand that, everything shifts. You stop waiting for perfect clarity. You stop searching for guarantees. You stop trying to eliminate all doubt, because you realize doubt will always exist when multiple possibilities are open, and the only way to quiet it is to collapse those possibilities into one path, through action, through commitment, through decision. This doesn't mean every choice will lead to the perfect outcome, but it does mean every choice moves you forward. Every decision teaches you something. Every step brings you closer to alignment. Even if you choose wrong, you are no longer stuck. You are no longer trapped in potential. You are moving, and movement creates momentum. Momentum creates clarity. Clarity creates confidence, and confidence reinforces your direction. But none of that begins until you choose. This is why the smallest decisions matter, because they are not small. Every time you choose to act instead of avoid, you strengthen a version of yourself that moves forward. Every time you choose courage over fear, you align with a reality where growth becomes normal. Every time you choose clarity over confusion, you reduce the space between possibilities. And over time, those small collapses of decision build a completely different life. A life that feels intentional. A life that feels real. A life that reflects who you are becoming, not who you've been. But if you continue avoiding choice, if you stay in hesitation, if you keep delaying action, then your life remains scattered, unfocused, undefined, because without decision, there is no direction, and without direction, there is no reality to fully step into. You remain split, pulled between what you want and what you're willing to choose. So the next time you feel uncertain, the next time you feel pulled in multiple directions, the next time you find yourself waiting, pause, and recognize what's really happening. You are standing in a field of possibilities. Nothing has collapsed yet. Nothing has been chosen. And that means you still have power. Not the power to control everything, but the power to decide something. And that decision, no matter how small, is the moment reality begins to take shape. Because in the end, your life is not defined by what could have happened. It is defined by what you chose. And every time you choose, you are not just making a decision. You are collapsing possibility into reality. You are stepping out of the unknown and into a path that becomes yours. And once you begin doing that consistently, you stop feeling lost. You stop feeling divided. You stop feeling like life is happening around you. Because now, you are inside it, moving through it, shaping it, one choice at a time. 7, you can step into a different reality. There comes a moment, after all the confusion, after all the overthinking, after feeling pulled in different directions for so long, where something inside you becomes quiet, not because everything is solved, but because something deeper is understood. You begin to realize you were never stuck. You were just repeating the same thoughts, repeating the same reactions, repeating the same patterns, until they became your reality. And because they were repeated for so long, they started to feel permanent. Like this is just who you are. Like this is just how life is. But that's not truth. That's familiarity. And familiarity can be broken, because the reality you are living right now is not the only one available to you. It is just the one you have been consistently aligning with, through your thoughts, through your focus, through your choices. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. You stop asking, why is my life like this? And you start asking a different question. What am I consistently aligning with? Because that question changes everything. It moves you out of blame and into awareness, out of confusion and into direction. Because the moment you realize your patterns created your current reality, you also realize something powerful. New patterns can create a different one. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually and inevitably, if you stay consistent. This is where most people misunderstand change. They think stepping into a new reality requires a massive transformation, a sudden breakthrough, a perfect plan, a completely different version of themselves overnight. But that's not how it works. reality doesn't shift in one moment. It shifts in small, repeated alignments. A thought you choose differently, a reaction you pause before repeating, a decision you make that your old self wouldn't. At first, it feels small, almost insignificant, like it won't change anything, but it does. Because every time you act differently, you step slightly away from your old pattern and slightly closer to a new one. And over time, those small shifts begin to accumulate. They begin to build momentum. And slowly, without you noticing at first, your reality starts to feel different. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because you are no longer the same person interacting with it. You are responding differently. You are seeing differently. You are choosing differently. And that changes everything. This is how you step into a different reality, not by escaping your current one, but by evolving within it. Because there is no sudden jump from one life to another. There is only movement, gradual, consistent movement, from one version of yourself to another. And the more you understand this, the less overwhelming change feels, because you no longer try to fix everything at once. You focus on alignment. You focus on direction. You focus on becoming aware of the patterns you are reinforcing every day, and asking yourself, is this leading me where I want to go? If the answer is no, you don't panic. You don't judge yourself. You don't try to force a massive shift. You simply adjust. One thought, one action, one decision at a time. And that's enough. Because consistency is more powerful than intensity. Small changes, repeated daily, will always outperform sudden bursts of effort that don't last. This is why some people transform their lives, while others stay stuck. Not because they are more talented, not because they are more lucky, but because they are more consistent in how they align themselves. They don't just think differently once. They practice it. They reinforce it. They live it until it becomes natural. And once it becomes natural, it no longer feels like effort. It feels like who they are. And that's when the real shift happens. Because identity is not something you discover. It is something you build through repetition, through choice, through alignment. So if you want to step into a different version of your life, you don't wait for permission. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You don't wait to feel completely ready. You begin now with what you have, where you are. You notice your patterns. You question your defaults. You challenge the thoughts that keep you in the same place. And you choose something different, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels uncertain. Because discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're stepping out of the old version of yourself and into something new. And yes, there will be moments where you slip back, moments where old patterns return, moments where it feels like nothing is changing. But that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're in transition, and transition always feels unstable, because you are no longer fully who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. And that space in between is where most people give up. But if you stay there, if you keep moving, if you keep aligning with the version of yourself you want to become, something powerful begins to happen. The old patterns lose strength. The new patterns gain momentum. And one day, without a dramatic moment, without a sudden realization, you look at your life and it feels different. Not completely new, but noticeably changed. Your reactions are different. Your mindset is different. Your direction is different. And most importantly, you are different. And that's when you understand something deeply. You didn't find a new reality. You stepped into it, gradually, intentionally, through consistent alignment. Because the truth is, the reality you want already exists as a possibility. It's not something you have to create from nothing. It's something you have to move toward. And every choice you make either brings you closer to it or keeps you where you are. So the question is no longer, is change possible? Because it is. The real question is, are you willing to align with it consistently? Because stepping into a different reality is not about one big moment. It's about a series of small decisions that lead you somewhere new. And once you commit to that process, you stop feeling stuck. You stop feeling divided. You stop feeling like life is happening outside of you, because now you are participating in it, shaping it, directing it, and slowly becoming the version of yourself that once felt out of reach. And in that moment, you realize something that changes everything. You were never trapped in one reality. You were always moving through possibilities. And now, you finally understand how to choose. 8. The reality you feed becomes real. There is something happening in your life right now, so subtle, so constant, that you don't even notice it anymore. But it is shaping everything. Not sometimes, not occasionally, every single moment. You are feeding a version of reality, and the one you keep feeding is the one that grows. Think about that carefully, because most people believe reality is something they enter, something that exists independently of them. They wake up, step into the world, and react to whatever happens. But that's not what's actually happening. You are not just entering reality, you are reinforcing it. Through your attention, through your emotions, through your reactions. Every time something happens, you don't just experience it, you respond to it. You give it meaning. You either hold on to it or let it pass. And that response determines whether that experience fades away or becomes stronger inside your life. This is why two people can go through the same event and carry completely different realities forward. One person gets rejected, and they let it define them. They replay it. They attach meaning to it. They tell themselves, "This always happens to me." And slowly, that single moment becomes a pattern, not because it was powerful, but because it was fed. Another person goes through the same experience, but they release it. They don't hold on to it. They don't turn it into identity, and so it passes. Same event, different reality, because one was fed and the other was not. This is the mechanism most people never understand. They think life is built from big moments, major decisions, dramatic turning points. But in reality, life is built from what you consistently reinforce. Small thoughts repeated daily, small reactions repeated unconsciously, small emotions that you keep revisiting. And over time, those small reinforcements become dominant patterns, and those patterns become your reality. So if you constantly revisit pain, pain becomes familiar. If you constantly replay fear, fear becomes natural. If you constantly focus on what's missing, lack becomes your environment. Not because that's all that exists, but because that's what you keep feeding. And whatever you feed expands in your awareness. This is why people feel trapped, not because reality is fixed, but because their patterns are consistent. They keep feeding the same version of life, and then wonder why nothing changes. They wait for something external to shift, while internally reinforcing the same experience, and nothing moves. Because reality responds to reinforcement, not just desire. You can want a different life all you want, but if your thoughts, emotions, and actions keep feeding the same patterns, you will remain in the same reality. This is why change feels so difficult, because it's not about one decision. It's about changing what you consistently give energy to, and that requires awareness. Because most of what you feed unconsciously. You don't even notice it. You just react automatically, without questioning it, without interrupting it. And that's how patterns stay alive. Not because they are strong, but because they are unchallenged. But the moment you become aware, everything begins to shift. Because awareness gives you a choice, a pause between what happens and how you respond to it. And In that pause, you decide what gets fed. You decide what continues and what stops. This is where your power is. Not in controlling everything that happens to you, but in controlling what you reinforce after it happens. You can't stop every negative thought from appearing, but you can stop repeating it. You can't control every emotion that arises, but you can choose whether you stay in it. You can't change the past, but you can decide whether you keep feeding it in the present. And that decision, repeated over time, changes everything. Because when you stop feeding a pattern, it weakens, slowly, quietly, without resistance. And when you begin feeding something new, it strengthens. At first, it feels unnatural, unfamiliar, like it doesn't belong to you. But the more you repeat it, the more natural it becomes, until one day, it replaces the old pattern completely. And that's when your reality shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but undeniably, because what you experience daily has changed, and what you experience daily becomes your life. This is why discipline matters. Not extreme discipline, but consistent awareness. The ability to notice where your energy is going and decide if it's leading you where you want to go. Because every moment, you are investing your attention somewhere. You are feeding something, a thought, a belief, a reaction, a version of yourself. And that investment is never neutral. It is always building something. So the real question is not, what is happening in my life? The real question is, what am I strengthening right now? Because whatever you strengthen will begin to define your reality. If you strengthen doubt, your world will feel uncertain. If you strengthen fear, your world will feel unsafe. If you strengthen clarity, your world will feel directed. If you strengthen confidence, your world will feel open. And this is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about being intentional, about choosing what deserves your attention and what does not. Because not everything that appears in your mind deserves to be fed. Not every thought needs to be repeated. Not every emotion needs to be extended. Not every experience needs to become identity. Some things are meant to pass, but they only pass if you stop feeding them. And once you understand this deeply, you stop being controlled by your reactions. You stop being pulled into every thought that appears. You stop reinforcing patterns that don't serve you, and you begin to take control of something far more important. Not the world around you, but the way you interact with it, because that interaction is what shapes your reality. So the next time something happens, pause it before you react, before you repeat, before you attach meaning. Ask yourself something simple. Do I want to feed this? Because that question determines everything. It determines whether this moment fades or becomes a pattern, whether this experience passes or becomes your identity, whether this version of reality continues or begins to dissolve. And in that moment, you realize something powerful. You are not just living your life, you are building it through what you feed, through what you repeat, through what you allow to grow. And once you take responsibility for that, you stop feeling powerless. You stop waiting for change. You stop hoping for a different life. Because now, you understand how it is created. Not all at once, but moment by moment, choice by choice, thought by thought, until one day, you look around and the reality you are living is no longer the one you were stuck in. It is the one you intentionally built. Because, in the end, reality is not just what exists. It is what you continuously give life to. And the moment you change what you feed is the moment your reality begins to change. 9. You are not experiencing reality. You are interpreting it. There is something happening right now that you rarely question, something so constant, so automatic, that it feels like part of reality itself. But it isn't. It's interpretation. Every single moment. You are not just seeing the world. You are interpreting it. You are assigning meaning to everything. Every word someone says. Every look someone gives. Every situation you find yourself in. And that meaning becomes your reality. Not the event itself. Not the situation. But the meaning you attach to it. This is where everything begins to change. Because most people believe they are reacting to reality. They say, "This happened, so I feel this way." But that's not what actually happens. Something happens, and then your mind interprets it. Instantly, automatically, without asking you. And based on that interpretation, you feel, you react, you decide. So the real sequence is this: event, interpretation, emotion, action, outcome. And most people never question the middle step. They assume their interpretation is the truth. But it isn't. It's a filter, a lens shaped by your past experiences, your beliefs, your fears, your expectations. Which means two people can experience the exact same moment and live completely different realities. One person is ignored in a conversation, and they think, "They don't respect me." Another person is ignored, and they think, "They're probably distracted." Same event, different interpretation, different emotion, different reality. And here's where it becomes powerful. If your interpretation shapes your reality, then your reality is not fixed. It is flexibly, because interpretation can change. But most people never change it. They repeat the same interpretations over and over again until they become automatic, until they become identity. I'm not good enough. Things never work out for me. People always leave. I always fail. These are not facts. They are repeated interpretations. But because they've been repeated so many times, they feel real. They feel unquestionable. They feel like truth. And once something feels like truth, you stop seeing alternatives. You stop questioning it. You stop exploring different meanings. And your reality becomes narrow, limited, predictable, because you are interpreting everything through the same lens. This is why patterns repeat in your life, not because life is against you, but because your interpretation hasn't changed. You walk into new situations, but you carry the same lens. You meet new people, but you expect the same outcomes. You face new opportunities, but you interpret them through old fears. And so, you recreate the same reality, again and again. But the moment you become aware of this, something shifts, because now there is a gap, a small space between what happens and how you interpret it. And in that space, you have a choice, not to control what happens, but to question what it means. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause and you ask yourself, is this the only way to see this? What else could this mean? What if I'm interpreting this based on old patterns, not current reality? And suddenly, the situation opens up. What once felt fixed now feels flexible. What once felt certain now feels questionable. And in that moment, your reality begins to expand, because you are no longer locked into one interpretation. You are exploring possibilities, and that changes everything. Because your interpretation doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects what you do next. If you interpret a situation as failure, you withdraw, you hesitate, you stop trying. If you interpret the same situation as feedback, you adjust, you learn, you move forward. Same event, completely different outcome. And over time, those different outcomes create completely different lives. This is how powerful interpretation is. It doesn't just shape moments. It shapes direction. It shapes identity. It shapes the version of reality you continue to live in. So, if you want to step into a different reality, you don't start by changing everything around you. You start by changing how you see it. Because the world is not just what it is what it means to you. And meaning is not fixed. It is created by you every moment through interpretation. And once you truly understand this, you stop blindly trusting every thought that appears. You stop reacting to every feeling as if it's truth. You start questioning, observing, choosing, and slowly, your lens begins to change. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw problems. You begin to feel possibilities where you once felt limitation. You begin to respond differently, even when the world around you hasn't changed. And that's when the shift becomes undeniable, because your reality is no longer controlled by automatic interpretation. It is shaped by intentional awareness. And that awareness gives you something most people never realize they have. Freedom. Not freedom from everything that happens, but freedom from being controlled by what it means. Because once you control the meaning, you influence the experience. And once you influence the experience, you begin to change the direction of your life. So the next time something happens, don't rush to react. Don't immediately accept your first interpretation as truth. Pause. Look again. Ask yourself, what else could this be? Because in that question, you are opening the door to a different reality. A reality that is not limited by old patterns. A reality that is not shaped by unconscious meaning. A reality that is chosen. And once you begin living like that, you stop feeling like life is happening to you. Because now, you understand something most people never do. You are not just experiencing reality. You are defining it. Moment by moment, interpretation by interpretation, choice by choice, until one day, the life you are living feels completely different, not because the world changed, but because you did. And in that shift, you don't just see reality differently, you live in a different one. So now you understand, this reality you're living is not the only one that exists. It's just the one you've been aligned with, through your thoughts, through your focus, through your choices. And every moment, you are either reinforcing this version of your life or stepping closer to another one. A different version of you already exists. Stronger, clearer, more certain, not in the future, but as a possibility right now. The question is not whether it's real. The question is, will you align with it? Because every thought you repeat, every decision you delay, every fear you follow is keeping you in the same reality. But the moment you choose differently, even slightly, something begins to shift. Not outside first, but inside. And that is where every new reality begins. So don't wait for everything to make sense. Don't wait to feel completely ready, because clarity doesn't come before the step. It comes after. And maybe this video didn't just reach you randomly. Maybe you were ready to see this. And now that you've seen it, you have a choice. Stay in the same reality or start stepping into a different one.